What are we discussing on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast? How did Zac Gallen look in his second outing against the division rival San Diego Padres? And playing a little game of should we be concerned or not with potential D-backs pitchers who could make the opening day roster who have been struggling this spring training.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? It was charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. We got to see the D-backs ace Zac Gallen make his second start on Tuesday against the San Diego Padres, and we'll be talking about how he looked in that game, along with how other D-backs pitchers have looked this spring training as we play a game of should we be concerned or not with pitchers who potentially will be on the opening day roster who have been struggling this spring. But before we get into that conversation, I just need to say thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. One of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. And don't forget, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Now let's talk about that D-backs spring training game on Tuesday, because the D-backs actually ended the game with a tie, 2-2. And to be honest, guys, I wish Major League Baseball actually had ties. I actually don't need extra innings. In the postseason, it's necessary. In the regular season, after 9 innings, after 3 hours of play, if there is still a tie score on the board, I'm fine just calling it up a tie. Some of you guys want that extra baseball. Some of you guys want to be in the stadium for another 4 hours. Sometimes I'm good after a baseball game. After my 3 hours of 9 innings baseball, I love baseball as much as the next guy. Sometimes I'm just good. Sometimes I have plans that night and I want to go home. So for Major League Baseball, I'm actually not too upset with the idea of maybe introducing the tie, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. The D-backs tied the San Diego Padres, and on the mound for the D-backs was their ace, of course, Zac Gallen, and he had himself a fine start. 2.2 innings pitched, 5 hits, 2 earned runs, and a home run allowed that led to those 2 earned runs. But for Zac Gallen, once again, it's just another start that helps him work his way into regular season shape. Again, Zac Gallen, like most pitchers in spring training, when you're at the elk of a Zac Gallen, right? Guys like Tommy Henry, Humberto Castellanos, like those guys are treating these games like postseason games because they're fighting for their jobs. They're fighting for roster spots. For Zac Gallen, he knows he's going to be the opening day starter, so his approach is a little bit different. The D-backs are still ramping him up this spring training. He's been taking it slow, only his second outing this spring training, and he's not going to these games with the expectation of trying to throw 99 and trying to go for a no-hitter and strike out every batter. Like, that's probably more of your regular season mindset approach. But for spring training, Zac Gallen wants to make sure he's working on his velo, working on hitting his location, his command. Right now, the 2 pitches that he really wants to work on this spring training is a fastball and his curveball. He threw it like over 70% of the time in this game against the Padres. The only issue is he couldn't show everything, right? The Padres are division foes, so Gallen did have to scale it back a little bit in terms of what he wants to show the Padres, but don't worry, by the time the D-backs face the Padres in the regular season, they will see the full Zac Gallen arsenal, because let's not act like Gallen normally sits in the velo range that he sat in Tuesday's game. His fastball on Tuesday sat between like 88 to 91 miles per hour. That's not going to be the case by the time the regular season rolls around. Gallen, because of the fact that he pitched over 240 innings pitched last year, The D-backs are taking it slowly, and by the time the regular season rolls around, he's not going to be sitting 88 to 91. He will be back in that 93 to 94 range, topping out at 95. So I wouldn't be concerned with Zac Gallen's velocity at all. Gallen still working on pitches, still trying to work his way into regular season shape. So the results on paper are not something we're going to be overly concerned with. I'm mostly listening to the interviews with Zac Gallen after, listening to how he says he felt about his starts. And again, like all these pitchers, if Gallen says he feels good, if Gallen says he's not worried, then I'm not worried until it's the regular season and we still see these pitchers give up earned runs like it's spring training. Other highlights from this spring training game: Corbin Martin looked pretty good. Still don't know what to expect from Corbin Martin when you think about him and his career with the D-backs. He had a 1 innings pitch with 1 strikeout. He was topping out at 95, so it looked very good in spring training. Still like the only piece from the Zach Greinke deal that the D-backs still have, a potential future with. Corbin Martin can still have a future as maybe a long reliever for the D-backs. I don't think he's going to make the opening day roster or anything like that, but is there a possibility that Corbin Martin maybe has a small impact with the D-backs out the pen this year? Yeah, I could see Corbin Martin getting a call up from AAA at some point this season and getting a cup of coffee. And who knows, if he pitches well, maybe he does earn himself a job in that bullpen, because we'll talk about one guy later in the should we be concerned, should we not be concerned segment. And if that guy, there's a guy that I am concerned with during that segment. And if he's not in the bullpen, hopefully by month 2, maybe Corbin Martin could be one of those guys that potentially takes his spot in the bullpen. So I would look out. I would keep Martin on your radar for, the foreseeable future to see what kind of opportunity he gets with the Arizona Diamondbacks. We also had Blake Walston out there in this game. Apparently, he's still in the mix for a rotation spot. I haven't really talked about him too much on this podcast whenever I've done like the spring training roster battle updates and everything, all the competitions. When talking about that number 5 battle, I never really talk about Blake Walston. I always talk about Henry, Ryan Nelson, and Slade. Walston is in the mix. He had a good outing against the Padres, 2 innings, 2 hits, no earned runs, 2 strikeouts, but he just feels like a lock to go back to the minors. There's a reason I haven't really talked about him. I think clearly 4th in this race. He hasn't even made his debut on the major league level, so I find it hard to believe his first chance as a D-backs pitcher will be as the number 5 starter to start the regular season. I just don't think that's even in the realm of possibility. So that's why we haven't talked about Blake Walston a lot, but nice outing for him on Tuesday. Blaze Alexander, he continues to look absolutely elite. Speed, defense, the hitting, everything that you could want from Blaze Alexander. He looked phenomenal once again. He got a hit on Tuesday, average 400, OBP 400, slugging 571. Give Blaze Alexander the backup shortstop job, please. If he doesn't win it, I'm going to pull all my hair out. Jake McCarthy had his best game of spring training probably. He had 2 RBIs. He had a 2 RBI triple. He stole a base. He showed the hitting ability. He showed the speed. Jake the Rake McCarthy was doing everything on Tuesday, like we've talked about. It feels like he's probably on the outside looking in for making the opening day roster because it would just be too many outfielders, but Jake the Rake is definitely going to be the first outfielder called up if the D-backs need one, and he still has a chance to make an impact as at least a base runner with the D-backs this season, because that's at least what he's been the last 2 years. 50 stolen bases over the last 2 years with like 180 games played. Jake McCarthy still has a path to make an impact with the D-backs, even if he's not an everyday player. And then finally, Tucker Barnhart seems to be putting a little strangle on the backup catcher role. He continues to look good. 2 walks at the plate, scored a run. Average again this spring training, 308. I think he's going to win the job over a Jose Herrera. We'll wait for the official word, but I would have Tucker Barnhart in the lead right now for that backup catcher job for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now we'll actually check in on the lefty pitcher competition before we get into our little game of should we be concerned or not. But before we get into any of that, if you want to catch D-backs games this season in person, of course, because why would you not want to see the boys in person? Then the best place you're going to want to go to buy tickets, of course, is Game Time, because Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All in prices show your total upfront, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. With zone deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big time savings. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at CareerThomas24 for my personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks about Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. And please, I'm going to say it once again, hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. We are slowly approaching 1,000 subscribers. Want to hit it before opening day, which is March 28th. So please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now let's talk about that lefty competition, the battle for the two lefty spots in the D-backs bullpen, because of course you can go with three lefties, but the D-backs historically have gone with two. At points during the regular season, they will more than likely roll with three, but for now, it feels like only two of Mantiply, Sal Frank, and Colin Nelson will make it to the D-backs bullpen. And so far this spring training, they have all put up similar numbers. Mantiply and Sal Frank pitched on Tuesday. They each put up a scoreless inning with a strikeout. And really, during the spring training, they all have been very close in terms of the numbers. Sal Frank has the best ERA at just a flat 3, but look at Kyle Nelson. He does have a better batting average allowed than an Andrew Sal Frank. Or excuse me, I actually got that wrong. Sal Frank has a better batting average allowed than Kyle Nelson, but Nelson has a better whip than Andrew Sal Frank. So some of the numbers point to Kyle Nelson. Also better strikeouts per 9 for Kyle Nelson than Andrew Sal Frank. Joe Mantiply, he has the same ERA as a Kyle Nelson, but he is a veteran, so he has a little bit more experience than those other two guys who are youngsters. So if I had to pick who's in the lead for that lefty competition right now, I would probably say it's Sal Frank and Mantiply, with Kyle Nelson as that close third, because Sal Frank, I think what he showed last year at the end of the regular season, what he did in the postseason, I think really impressed this D-backs team a lot. And so far in the spring training, he's put up the best ERA. The strikeout numbers have been pretty decent as well. Double-digit strikeouts per 9. And then Joe Mantiply, again, like I just said, most experienced guy on the team. He's been an all-star with the D-backs. He's a veteran. I just think you probably have the most trust of Mantiply because he's done it the longest. And then Sal Frank with the second half he had last year, maybe that inspires the D-backs as well to make him to put him in the opening day bullpen. But Kyle Nelson, I still think he's in the mix. I don't think he's out of it. If he gets, 3 more outings this spring training and goes scoreless, 3-4 more outings, I don't know, and goes scoreless on all of them, he can definitely work his way and leapfrog a Sal Frank in this competition. But that to say how it's going right now, it seems like Sal Frank and Mantiply would be in the lead. I don't know if the fact that Torey Lovullo paired them together on Tuesday means anything at all, or if I'm just reading into it. But I think Nelson quietly is on the outside looking in, but it's super close. Like on the outside looking in makes it sound like Sal Frank and Mantiply are in the club, and then Nelson's on the outside hating and he can't even get in. I don't think it's like that. It's probably like a 1A, 1B, and then a 2 and a Kyle Nelson, right? Like, does that make sense? Mantiply 1A, Sal Frank 1B, and then Kyle Nelson number 2 in the competition. I think that's how I would have it stacked up right now for the two lefty bullpen spots for the Arizona Diamondbacks. But now let's play our little game of should we be concerned or not with some potential pitchers that could make the D-backs opening day roster who have been struggling a little bit this spring training. The first guy that I will mention, though, he actually hasn't struggled in terms of the numbers because you actually look at his ERA, and his ERA so far this spring training is 0. And I'm talking about Paul Sewald, 4 innings pitched, no earned runs, 3 strikeouts. So why is he on the list of should we be concerned or not? It more has to do to the fact that Paul Sewald's velocity has not been there this spring training. And it's one of those things of how much does that really concern you? Is it because he's just working on different pitches? Because we know Paul Sewald has always been a 2-pitch guy, fastball sweeper, but now he's starting to work on that changeup and is working on a different pitch and the different grips and stuff. Is that messing with his velocity? I don't know. Is it just because we're in spring training and he's not trying to throw his arm out when the games don't matter? I don't know. There's a lot of variables as to why a guy doesn't throw as hard in spring training as to their velocity in the regular season, but it is still something to mention because for Sewald, he is down about 2 to 3 ticks on his fastball. Like, it's one thing if it's like he went from 91 to 90, but he's going from like 92 to like 89. Like, that's Madison Bumgarner level of dropping off with your velo. And if that velo is not there during the regular season, then like, yeah, you're going to need that third pitch to be a plus pitch. But the question is it just because this is kind of what Paul Sewald has done throughout his career? You look at Sewald, Torey Lovullo has talked about it. Spring training, he always starts slow. He always doesn't throw as hard in spring training, and then he ramps it up. You look at his numbers throughout his career, definitely throws not as hard in the start of the season as opposed to the end of the season where it seems to be ramping it up. Second half, postseason, it seems like Paul Sewald, I mean, not just seems, the numbers actually bear out. He does throw harder as the year goes on. So for Paul Sewald, I would like to just say it's a case of spring training. We'll see as we get closer to the regular season and as we enter the regular season if his velo still stays this low, but I'm not concerned just yet. We'll see. But the other thing is, when you look at Paul Sewald's career, his fastball velo, like last season, was like higher than what it was 3 or 4 years ago. So not only is he a guy that has thrown harder as the season goes on. I always struggle with my words. Paul Sewald, when you look at his career, he throws harder as his career gets longer. So he just second half career, second half season, whatever you want to say, he needs more arm fatigue for him to throw harder for some reason. So I'm not concerned with Paul Sewald's velocity just yet. Then the other guy that I want to discuss of should we be concerned or not is Miguel Castro, because he's the guy that I mentioned earlier that maybe Corbin Martin can take his spot in the bullpen, because Castro is someone that I am concerned about. He has just been horrendous this spring training. 6 earned runs, over 4.1 innings pitched, also 4 walks allowed, and he hasn't even allowed a home run. His whip, 2.31, 300 average allowed. Like, Castro, I mean, it feels like every pitch is sitting over the middle of the plate. Feels like these opposing batters are locking in on anything Castro throws. And again, it's spring training batters, so it's not like you're going against the Tatises and the Bryce Harpers every day. Like, I don't know a lot of these players out there, and Miguel Castro is getting lit up by all of them. And so this is someone that is going to have a potential role in the D-backs bullpen for how it's tracking right now, right? Like, he is someone under contract for the D-backs. So the idea of him actually starting the season in the bullpen is a real possibility. Hopefully the D-backs get smart before the season starts, and I don't know what they could do. DFA him, trade him, straight up cut him. I don't know what the solution is, but I just don't know if you could enter the regular season with the Miguel Castro. It really concerns me. Like I said on yesterday's pod, if he's there to start the season, if he pitches more than a month with the Arizona Diamondbacks, he will definitely blow 2 to 3 games in the first 25 games of the season for the D-backs. So hopefully Miguel Castro, again, I don't want anyone to lose their job. So hopefully the D-backs can send Miguel Castro to another organization so he can get another opportunity somewhere else. Now, I got a couple more pitchers that I want to play the game of should we be concerned or not with. But I first need to talk to you guys about this new sponsor for the pod called Prize Picks, because football season may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up. Whether it's tournament season or the fight for playoff home court, there's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. Get in on the excitement with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. I love going on Prize Picks, making my picks and winning some money, especially if it's the LA Lakers and I get to make some plays with LeBron James and put some money in my pocket. And if you want to do the same, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. And let's get through my last couple players that I want to discuss of should we be concerned or not. The next guy I want to discuss is Brandon Pfaadt. Because, of course, for Brandon Pfaadt, we know the type of regular season he had last year. Don't tell me about the postseason and his magical run, because guess what? It was magical. The D-backs don't get to the World Series if Brandon Pfaadt doesn't turn it on. But the reason we needed him to turn it on, the reason why it was such a revelation is because of how much Pfaadt struggled in the regular season. 96 innings pitched, right? 22 home runs allowed. Not good. 10.2 hits per 9 allowed. Not good. 1.406 whip. Not good. His issue was he gave up a lot of hits and he gave up a lot of home runs and a lot of hard contact. He actually didn't struggle with his command in terms of being all over the place and missing his location and allowing a lot of walks. Like Brandon Pfaadt didn't struggle with that. He struggled with giving up contact and loud contact and consistent contact. And we need him to get back to that postseason fat as the number 4 starter for the D-backs who have a good regular season. And so far in spring training, Pfaadt hasn't looked like postseason Pfaadt. He's looked a little bit closer to regular season from last year Pfaadt. Pfaadt himself hasn't been too concerned with how he's looked. He really is happy with how he looked in the 3rd outing this spring training. But even with that being said, 7 earned runs over 5.2 innings pitched, 11-12 ERA. Not something that I'm too happy about. Only 2 strikeouts as well. Very surprising because Pfaadt is someone that is a strikeout artist, right? Again, he was such a tantalizing prospect because he had a 200 strikeout minor league season, which has only been done like once in the last 13 years. Like Pfaadt had an all-time minor league season. He's considered this elite strikeout artist. He hasn't been able to do it this spring training, and hopefully he'll be able to turn up in the regular season. 159 whip this spring training, 333 average allowed. The numbers are not good for Pfaadt. Am I concerned? Not yet. I wanted to say just a little bit, but we'll go with not yet. Again, for a lot of these guys, I'm not going to be concerned with until we get to the regular season. Miguel Castro is someone I'm already concerned with because he was just so bad in the second half of the D-backs last regular season. He really hurt the team in the second half. So that's why I'm concerned with him, because I've already seen him be bad for a prolonged stretch. My most recent memory of Miguel Castro is him not helping the D-backs out. And now we get to spring training and he's continued to struggle. That's why I am out on Miguel Castro. But Pfaadt, maybe there's 3% of concern with Pfaadt because of how we saw last regular season go. But again, once we get to the regular season is where we'll start to really make our evaluations. How about Eduardo Rodriguez, Erod, the new offseason acquisition? How do we feel about him? Because if you look at his ERA, 9 ERA flat, 8 earned runs over 8 innings pitched this spring training. But for him, he's also a guy I'm not going to be concerned with just yet. I know his whip is 213. I know his average allowed this spring training is 361, but it was mostly because of those first couple of turns through spring training. His most recent outing, 4 innings pitched, only 1 earned run. Eduardo Rodriguez, Erod, also 10 strikeouts. I'm not concerned with Erod just yet. The velo's starting to pick back up a little bit as we get closer to the regular season. He seemed to be getting deeper in his bag. That most recent outing he had looked a lot closer to regular season Erod. And he said in that outing, that was about 80% of where he wants to be once we get to the regular season. So if 80% Erod is 4 innings pitched, 1 earned run, I'm not going to be too concerned with him. The only thing that ever concerns me with Erod is his health, because again, he's a guy that hasn't thrown a ton of innings in his career due to injury. So as long as he can make it through spring training healthy, as long as the velo is right around his career average, then I won't be concerned at all with Erod as we enter the regular season. Then the final guy I want to discuss is Tommy Henry, because Tommy Henry started the spring training on fire through his first couple outings. We were like, oh my God, Tommy Henry is going to run away with the number 5 starter job. But over his last 2 outings, the same can't be said. 8 earned runs over his last 2 outings with 3 home runs allowed. Tommy Henry does make me a little bit concerned. 182 whip, 354 average allowed. And it's because he's coming off the injury. He was only expected to be the number 5 starter. So it's not like Tommy Henry, we have an immense amount of expectations for Tommy Henry. It was a battle for that number 5 starter. So I'm just a little bit concerned because of how bad it's gone in the last 2 outings, how much hard contact he's given up, how much he seems to be struggling all of a sudden, and the fact that he's coming off injury. There is concern there, but long term, like Tommy Henry, we know what he is. We just need him to be a long reliever, number 5 starter type. We're not putting a lot of eggs in the Tommy Henry basket. So even though I might be concerned right now with how he looks through the last couple outings of spring training, long term, it doesn't really affect the D-backs too much because he's not someone that's going to make or break the D-back season. So the long term outlook, you shouldn't be concerned. But for what we want right now in the battle in the number 5 starter competition, there is a little bit concerned with Tommy Henry with how he's looked recently. And because of that, Ryan Nelson seems to be taking the lead in that competition for the number 5 starter. Now that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.